Is everybody having fun doing their de-leavening and cleaning out everything the past few weeks here? Because it is that time of the year again, which we are going through our cabinets, our refrigerators, looking for stuff that has leavening products into it to try to get rid of it. And I was doing that a little bit this past week, and I was absolutely surprised at some of the products in my freezer that actually had leavening in them. There was some ravioli that had leavening, baking soda basically. Waffle fries, tater tots had baking soda in them. So it's like, I couldn't believe it. So, some meatballs, some other different things. I was really surprised at all. I mean, I expected it in the frozen pizza. We got one left to try to use up. But, potato products and pasta products, it has leavening in them. I just don't know what to think about that. But I know what others think about us. Other Christians think that we're crazy or that we're nuts, that we're throwing out our bread, throwing out our yeast products, throwing out the baking powder, the baking soda, especially even the ones that are in there soaking up in all the odors in our refrigerator. We're throwing those out. It's probably the only time we change them. They probably sit there the whole year, and then we finally decide to, put it down the sink to clean out the sink as it's going to waste. But we do this every year. So why do we do this every year? Why do we do this every single year? And when we are doing this cleaning, do we forget the real purpose for it? Do we? Have the days before the Feast of Unleavened Bread become the days of spring cleaning? What is the true focus of these days? Even though we've been de-leavening our homes, tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow we're going to be cleaning out the refrigerator, the stove, throwing out everything. Tomorrow is the big work day. I'm dreading getting up tomorrow because we got a lot more de-leavening to do in our home. But we've got to wipe down the refrigerator, do some more vacuuming. Clean out the microwaves, clean out the toaster, or in my case, sometimes I just throw the toaster out as it's difficult to clean it. It's cheaper sometimes and less expensive to buy a new one. But we put a lot of effort into de-leavening, but are we overlooking the important spiritual lessons of the Passover, the night to be much observed, and the feast of the days of unleavened bread? As we finish our de-leavening in the next few days here, let us consider the 5 W's of de-leavening. And that is my title, the 5 W's of de-leavening. De-leavening is actually spelled with D-E and then a hyphen and then leavening. Because if you put that in as one word, you'll get an error on your word program. So it's the 5 W's of de-leavening. Why, where, what, who, and when. Why? Why should we de-leaven? Well, Exodus chapter 12, beginning in verse 1, it says, "Now the Eternal spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying," and then in verses 2 through 14, God proceeds to give them instructions on how they should keep the Passover. And then he gives this command regarding the Feast of Unleavened Bread in verse 15 of Exodus 12. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. Whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. For 7 days no leaven shall be found in your houses. Since whoever eats what is leavened, that same person shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he is a stranger or a native of the land. So the simple answer to that question, why should God's people de-leaven, is that God commands it. Yes, but why does he command it? Verse 17. So you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this same day I will have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as an everlasting ordinance. In verse 39, it says that they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were driven out of Egypt and could not wait, nor had they prepared provisions for themselves. So they were to keep the annual practice of de-leavening because he brought his Old Testament church, the nation of Israel, out of Egypt. Now, if you look up the origins of spring cleaning, you'll find that many believe it started because of these verses right here in the Bible. Now, other cultures have similar habits, the Persians, the Japanese. However, they did this long after the Israelites had began this practice. So did God really intend his people to observe this practice forever, as we read in verse 17? Was it just for the Israelites and for the Jewish people of Jesus' time? Was it? Was it meant for Christians? Some say that it was nailed to the cross. That's a whole another message. But it wasn't. These three scriptures I'm going to read here are talking about the early church after Jesus' crucifixion. It shows that indeed it was a New Testament practice. First is Acts chapter 12 and verse 3. It says, and because he saw that it pleased the Jews, Herod proceeded further to seize Peter also. Now it was during the days of unleavened bread. And in Acts chapter 20 verse 6, it says, but we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread. So they were keeping those days. In 1 Corinthians chapter 5, in verse 6 through 8, it says, for your glory is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Therefore purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, since you truly are unleavened. For indeed Christ, our Passover, was sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast, not with the old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. We know that Jesus kept the feast of unleavened bread, and perhaps what is more important for our example here is that these scriptures actually prove that his early New Testament church kept it after his death and resurrection. As we know, the church is the spiritual Israel of God. So where? The other W here, where? Where should we de-leaven? Again, God gives us instruction on this point through Moses. It says, on the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. 7 days shall there be no leaven found in your houses. Again, that's Exodus chapter 12, and that's verses 15 and 19. Now, the English phrases from your houses and in your houses derive from a single Hebrew word, bayith, which can also mean homes, households, or families. Now, in Exodus chapter 13, in verse 7, it expands on this a little. Exodus chapter 13, verse 7, it says, unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and no leavened bread shall be seen among you, nor shall leaven be seen among you in all your quarters. The English word, your quarters, is the Hebrew word gabal, which can mean borders, coast, bounds, landmarks, space, limits, territory, and region. So God's instruction shows that we should de-leaven all the areas in which we are responsible. Obviously, this includes our homes, but what about our cars, our garages, our yards, our workspaces? Should we de-leaven them? Where do our quarters end? God expects his people to be sensible. He doesn't have to explain every single little detail to the members of his church. He does not expect us to de-leaven areas where there has been no chance of leaven getting into it. Does anyone ever eat in the car? You might want to de-leaven it. What about carrying groceries in your trunk? Has anyone eaten at your workspace? Are you sure? But if we are absolutely sure that no leaven has been taken into an area which we have responsibility over, then there really is no need to go and de-leaven it. Our time during this period of the year is too valuable to waste on, cleaning areas that you're not going to find any leaven. But you'll be surprised if you have little kids. It can be anywhere. We should be spending more time actually in preparing for the Passover and searching for spiritual leavening. What? Exactly what should we remove from our property during the duration, for the 7 days of unleavened bread? Well, what is leaven? What are leavening agents and leavening products? Well, we just had a message last week on leavening products that my son gave, so I won't spend too much time rehashing all that, but basically it's yeast, baking soda, baking powder, and then there's about 4 others that cause bread to rise. Now these agents, they puff up dough just like sin puffs up. So the important thing is to please remember the symbolism. We are to be removing sin from our lives. No matter how long we vacuum, no matter how hard we scrub, it is physically impossible to get rid of every single bit of leaven in our homes. It's in the dust. And just like the expulsion of spiritual sin from our lives, we must be doing our part and working hard at it, with both physical and spiritual de-leavening. If we do our best, God's grace will make up for the difference. So who? Who should do the de-leavening? Well, I'm going to be very careful with this one since the ladies here outnumber the men right now. But it's not just something that mom does. Mom's not the one that cleans everything. Can mom repent of and rid you of your sins? No. We have to work out our own salvation. We got to work out our own sins. We have to do our own de-leavening. Everybody must take part in the de-leavening. All family members, including the children, must become involved doing their part in removing sin. Here's what God commands about teaching our children about their involvement in the Feast of Unleavened Bread. In Exodus chapter 13 and verse 8, "And you shall tell your son in that day, saying, This is done because of what the Eternal did for me when I came up from Egypt." We can put in there sin for Egypt. "It shall be as a sign to you on your hand, and as a memorial between your eyes, that the Eternal's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Eternal has brought you out of Egypt. With a strong hand the Eternal has brought you out of the world, out of sin. Even very young children should be taught the lesson and the meaning of de-leavening, of the de-leavening process. The annual de-leavening project should be looked upon as a positive family activity, as well as a memorable prelude to the spring holy days. Not every church member, though, however zealous, can do heavy housework, much less enjoy it. Increasing numbers of our aging church population are in poor health and cannot de-leaven their homes. If this is the case for anyone, they should not hesitate to ask their fellow members for help. Again, think about what the process symbolizes. Remember that none of us can do it alone. None of us can do it alone. We all need to help put out spiritual lives, our spiritual living as well. I mean, we all have to work on this together as a family, as a church. So when should we begin our de-leavening? More importantly, when should our de-leavening be done by? When should it be finished? Again, looking at Exodus chapter 12 and verse 15, it provides the answer. It says, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. This first day is the first holy day of God's annual holy day season. He commands his people to hold a special church service and to do no work other than what is necessary to prepare food. A better way to say this is you shall have removed leaven from your houses by the first day. Exodus chapter 12 and verse 18. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. For 7 days no leaven shall be found in your houses, for since whoever eats the leaven, that same person shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he is a stranger or a native of the land. Verse 20, it says, you shall eat nothing leavened. In all your dwellings you shall eat unleavened bread. All leaven must be off our property by sunset at the close of Abib or Nisan 14. This sunset marks the night to be much observed and the beginning of the first day of unleavened bread. No leavening should be in your home until after the last day of unleavened bread. Can't be any plainer than that. Yeah, we must be careful that in our zeal to complete the task of de-leavening, that it does not overshadow what is most important. The preparation leading up to the Passover and the days of unleavened bread must not be merely physical, because not only do we search our homes, cars, and workspaces for leavening, but we must also remember to diligently search ourselves. The physical effort of removing leaven from our surroundings should remind us of the spiritual effort necessary to remove sin from our actions. As physical beings, we can easily jump into the literal task of de-leavening while struggling to connect with the parallel spiritual assignment. It's funny how our actions sometimes go, how our actions are when something goes wrong or something upsets us, how it reminds us that we still have a lot of cleaning to do in our spiritual lives. A lot of cleaning to do in our spiritual lives. I realized that just the other day with my mother-in-law. sometimes it's difficult to deal with unconverted family members. But we can't get too wrapped up with the physical actions of our lives while neglecting the spiritual. The religious leaders of Christ's time fell into this trap. They took painstakingly steps to address physical things while practically ignoring the spiritual matters. Self-righteousness drove their approach. Jesus told them that their thinking was wrong. In Matthew chapter 23, verse 28, Matthew chapter 23, verse 28, it says, "Even so you also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity." He wanted them to focus outwardly and inwardly. Christ likened them to tombs or graves, which are clean and painted white or glossed on the outside, but are filled with death and decay, in verse 29. He admonished them for their actions, which were like cleaning the outside of a dirty pot or pan, but leaving the inside untouched, in verse 26. Their focus was only on the areas that people could see. While the Pharisees' attitude was extreme, Christians can fall into a similar mindset with de-leavening. We can end up spending too much time de-leavening our cupboards than we do purifying our hearts. We are required to examine ourselves and to seek for our own faults. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 28 says, "But let a man examine himself, and so let him eat the bread and drink of the cup." We were born in sin and shaped in iniquity, which is said in Psalm 51, verse 5. Spiritual leaven is everywhere in and around us. We can clean up one area of our lives only to turn and see even more. How many times have you de-leavened your homes only to find leavening during the days of unleavened bread? That's how sin works. You think you got it all, then you find out that you really haven't. We will be fighting that battle until Christ returns. Brethren, we must put more effort into getting rid of sin than getting rid of the leaven each year. Getting rid of spiritual leavening or sin is like getting rid of the physical leavening. You find the leaven, you remove it, and you keep it out. The 5 W's of de-leavening may be new for a few of you, but it is a timely reminder for most. Done properly, they help us to look forward to the feast of unleavened bread with a proper mindset.